Father, we give you thanks for the privilege able to come before you and seek your guidance and wisdom. We thank you that you are sovereign and in control. And when we feel out of control, we depend upon you and know, God, that you hold us in the palm of your hand. Thank you for this township. You care about the township and its residents. And thank you for those that demonstrate that care daily, whether in their jobs here, or first responders, volunteers, the fire department, and others, so many who that care, and even just neighbor to neighbor. We're thankful for where we live. We're blessed to be where we are. Help us to do well tonight, to debate, and to find wisdom and consensus on things that are beneficial and a blessing to our community. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Will you rise with me for the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You're strong in that. All right. At this time, I'm going to ask our clerk to take roll.
Katherine Henry.
Here.
Becky Steele.
Here.
Terry Belder. Here. Treasurer.
Yes.
Supervisor.
Here.
Here.
Identifying our absent member.
Josh Long.
Thank you. Very good. Next, the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to place the agenda for approval before the board? So moved.
Support.
Support discussion.
I would, I guess maybe, I'm not sure, I need to make a motion to amend that, or I would request that we take 2 items out of the consent agenda and add an item at the end, just for a brief discussion on the packets and the manner of getting the packets for the meetings. And then kind of a question about if an action item is needed with regard to the email or letter that we received about 1300 Maplewood. It just seemed like perhaps that was being teed up for an action item, but yet I didn't see an action item on the agenda.
Okay. So which of the items in the consent agenda, first off, would you like to remove and add to the end?
The minutes, there's just one correction on page 5, and then I have some questions on the bills.
Okay.
Not specifically the one that are just called general bills, not the lunch and.
Okay. So items 10 Roman numeral I and 10 Roman numeral 2. Is that right? Those 2 items?
Yes.
Okay, we'll make those, how about we make those 18A and B? All right, and then did I hear something after that or not?
Just to be clear, are you saying to put them after the discussion on the fire department device request?
If there's a reason or rationale for an elsewhere, I'm happy to do so.
Just right before, I just
Okay.
have some points that kind of related to that.
Sure. So we'll call them 17A, 17B. All right, anyone else? Anything else?
Yeah, I'd like to add 2 items on the agenda. First, and this could be 18B or 18B2. Schedule goal setting meeting. Or at least discuss it.
So not as part of discussion, but in that you want an action item, look at an agenda. Okay? We'll call it 18A because we called the other 17, so we'll just do that A a little bit.
I guess I don't know if we just kind of skipped over it, but talking about the, having a brief discussion and hearing an action item taken on the packets for our meetings.
Could we reserve that for discussion and general information, or do you think it's something that's going to have to be moved and acted upon, as opposed to, I think here's a suggestion?
I think it's important enough that we refer us to about just some of your suggestions.
All right. 12?
which would go to 4:15.
All right, so we'll just call it 14A, how's that? Discussion, 15. All right. Anything else? Hearing none? There's a motion before you, now it's been amended as the proposal for the agenda tonight. Do we need another motion for that amendment? Let's have a motion then, according to the amendments that have been suggested.
Yeah, that was kind of my motion, was to
All right,
get it over that.
moved and supported, discussion on the amendment of the agenda to add the items that were mentioned. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, now with the amended agenda, do we now have approval for the agenda now as amended?
Motion. Approve agenda. Support.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, anyone opposed? All right, at this time, we're going to look to Minette Minier. Minette's over here. So as she comes, we've been advertising the fact that we'd like to use some of our time at these initial meetings of the new board to just cover some specialties and areas within the township, just to learn more, if you already know a lot already, or to maybe learn some brand new if you've now explored some of this. And no one better to present zoning than Minette, who has been in our position as zoning administrator until a recent cutback in time, begin maybe 2 months ago or so, but she's been with us 27 years. Is that right? Wow, okay, that was a guess, okay. Long time. Long time. We appreciate Minette very much, and Minette, take it away.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to explain zoning. So what is zoning? Zoning is balancing the rights of the individual with the rights of the community through regulation. So you can see, this will be an example when zoning is not in place. Things can happen. I mean, if you live in a residential area, you would want your neighbor to sell their house to a drive-through restaurant or to industrial use. So planning and zoning are the basis for the regulations used by township staff, the township board, planning commission, and zoning board of appeals when making decisions about development and uses within the township. Zoning is public regulation of land use. It protects property values, natural resources, and prevents nuisances. Ensures land use compatibilities, prevents overcrowding, and prevents overuse of land. It regulates development in an orderly and pre-planned way, and decisions can be made through the use of standards. That way we're fair with everybody. Planning is the creation of a vision for the future development of the township through the formation, adoption, and maintenance of the master plan. The process of thinking about and organizing the activities required to achieve a desired goal. We get our authority all through state law to have zoning. The Zoning Enabling Act and the Planning Enabling Act are the two statutes that give us most of our authority to do what we do. We also use the Land Division Act in a lot of the zoning uses that we have. Another couple laws that are important to us as well are the Michigan Freedom of Information Act and the Open Meetings Act. So everything we do is subject to both. So for the FOIA, that establishes procedures to ensure every citizen's right of access to the government documents. And it gives the right to anyone to inspect and receive copies of our records within a specified time. With the Open Meetings Act, it protects citizens' rights to know what's going on in government by opening to full public view the process by which elected and non-elected officials make decisions. It requires all deliberations and all decisions to be made in the public. It requires that any meeting of a quorum of a public body must be properly noticed and must be open to the public. The Zoning Enabling Act, as amended, provides the authority for us. That's where we get the authority to make any of our zoning decisions. It gives us the authority to have a zoning ordinance, and I brought visual aids. We have a zoning ordinance, plus it's on the website for everyone to see it and look at it. And we also have a zoning map. And the zoning map designates boundaries for the zoning district. The zoning ordinance and map are actually considered to be one document, which is the law adopted by the Township Board that regulates the development and use of land within the township. It establishes the Zoning Board of Appeals and details its powers and prescribes the powers and duties of certain officials. And the Planning Enabling Act provides the authority for the township to create, adopt, and maintain our master plan. Okay, some more visual aids here. This was the master plan that was adopted in 2015. It's also on our website. And this is the future land use map. That designates the boundaries again, just the same thing as the zoning ordinance. This designates boundaries. And just a little note about it, it's not supposed to be parcel specific, though we do use out-of-county GIS, so we do use the parcels, the parcel lines. But basically, it says right in the master plan, it's not parcel specific. So we look at something in it as this general area to have the line. Okay, this, it also gives us the authority to have the master, or to have the planning commission and provide special zoning provisions. So the master plan and the future land use map, that's one document, that's basically for the future. It consists of text and the map showing future boundaries for the zoning district. It provides a snapshot of the current township along with goals for the future, and provides long-range guidance and policy. Where the zoning ordinance and map, again, are one document, and that is the future, or that is the immediate, not the future. It's what we're used right now in our day-to-day business. It's, again, one document consisting of text with regulations for land use and location of structures on land, along with a map that shows the current boundaries for zoning districts. It's used for current regulatory decisions, and it is enforced. The zoning administrator is responsible for the day-to-day administration and enforcement of the ordinance, along with other designated staff. Okay, the future land use, the future plan and the future land use map is a guide for public officials and private citizens to use in making informed decisions that will affect the community. It's a statement of policy that describes the desired physical development of the community. It's a guide for future development, and it's the legal basis for our zoning. It provides reason and rationale behind regulations in the zoning ordinance. It's compiled by the Planning Commission and staff, and it is adopted by the Planning Commission, but also the Township Board. Many years ago, the board made a motion for them to also be an approving authority. So the future land use map shows the boundaries for the future zoning districts described in the master plan. It's reviewed every 5 years or more when necessary, and we are already beginning to review it in 2021. And just a note for you, this will be the 4th one that we have done. We do them basically about every 5 years, that we're doing it in-house. We're not hiring another company to do it, so it's basically ours. What we've been doing in the past, for the past 4 of them, is we get together with all the boards and commissions members. Everybody has a chance to speak, so everybody is a part of it. And then staff and the planning commission work on it, and then eventually there are steps that go with it. We present it to the board. If the board has information, they can send it back to the planning commission. If they want something changed or some revisions. So it's basically a cooperative effort with all the boards and commissions and the planning commission and staff. And the reason that's a good thing is because then everybody has ownership in it. So we use that to make our decisions with zoning. The zoning ordinance and map, again, that's one document that provides standards for uses in each specific zoning district, including those allowed by right and those allowed with a special use permit. And I'll explain a little bit more about special use permits in a minute. It regulates development, including minimum lot size, width, height of structures, placements of structures on a lot, and density. So if you live in Georgetown Township and you live in an LDR district, you have the right to expect that your neighbors are not going to build a house closer than 10 feet to their side lot line. They have that. Everybody has a 40-foot front yard setback, 40-foot rear, 10 on each side. You have the right to expect that everybody in Georgetown Township has to meet those minimum standards. So the zoning ordinance and map is a compilation of the ordinances reviewed and recommended by the planning commission and adopted by the board. It's constantly reviewed and amended. Basically, up until this past year, which now we have probably about 6 items we have been reviewing a little bit, but we will review more in 2021. So it was a busy year, obviously, with all the elections and then with COVID. But, so it is something that we look at as far as the planning commission is concerned every couple months. And we revise the ordinance regularly and talk about, keep up with certain things like, not that long ago, you know, the mobile food trucks became popular. so then we address that. And when certain things come into our attention that we need to amend the ordinance, then we look at it and amend it. And so the steps are, the planning commission reviews it, they hold a public hearing, and then they make a recommendation, then it comes to the board. And then the board would be the approving authority. And no, all the ordinances are for everyone. Everybody who lives in Georgetown Township or has a business has to abide by our zoning ordinances. The zoning map divides the community into various districts or zones and describes regulations on use, building structures, and land within the various zones. It's also a police power regulation adopted to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. It prevents incompatible uses from locating in an area. And just for a note on this too, back in 1980, the industrial park was approved. Well, there are some houses that are next to that, and it's not a good thing because the industrial park has noise, operates sometimes a little bit later on in the night, and it's not good to have like a residential use next to a very intense use like an industrial use. So that's what we look at to try not to do. It prevents nuances through setbacks, green belts, bufferings, and screenings. Prevents overcrowding by instituting density and intensity provisions through lot sizes and setbacks. And this is important for density because sometimes you're going to see PUDs come to you, planned unit developments, with somebody wants to build condos instead of houses. But we still keep the density as the same number as it would be if it was houses. And then it creates desirable and harmonious places for people to live, work, and play. It's a means to an end of building a community that is based on goals. While zoning regulation constrains the use of land and arrangement of uses and structures on the land, it protects each property owner from the uncontrollable actions of others. Land uses such as junkyards, concrete batch plants provide valuable services to the community, but their appropriate location is not adjacent to a residential area. Zoning actions run with the land, not the individual, so if a business gets approval to locate somewhere and another business comes in, even if it's the same business, they have the right to be there. Each district lists the permitted uses of land within that district, such as residential, commercial, or industrial. And this is interesting because it's different than what you would expect. If a use is not listed, it's not allowed. It's only allowed where it's listed. And obviously, we can't list every single use there is in the whole universe. So basically, it's the zoning administrator's responsibility to determine if a use fits a certain category. And then if the person doesn't agree with that or doesn't agree with any decision made by the zoning administrator, they can appeal that decision to the zoning board of appeals. Okay, and then the list of land uses includes those that are allowed by right and then those that might be allowed with specific conditions, and those are called special land uses. And they have extra conditions that they have to meet. Some applications require a public hearing to be held with the planning commission, such as plats, rezonings, PUDs, and special use permits. And PUDs are required to have a public hearing at the Township Board too, which you have one tonight on your agenda as well. So a public hearing was held at the planning commission, and you will also hold a public hearing here. And then for public hearings, notices have to be published 15 days or more before the public hearing, and property notices are sent to the property owners within 300 feet of the subject property as per the Zoning Enabling Act. And at your last meeting, you approved the contract with the Grand Rapids Press, which is to publish those notices. And also there has been movement in the legislature to get rid of that requirement and let us just publish on our website, which we all are hoping that will happen. Okay, here's an example of a district. I don't want you to have to read this, but it shows you the permitted uses in the LDR district, such as a single-family home that's permitted by right. But then you can see, I'm not going to go through them all, but you can see churches and daycare centers are some that are allowed in the LDR district, but with a special use permit. So that means they have to meet additional standards. So for example, there's 4 general standards that all special uses have to meet. Be designed, operated to be harmonious and appropriate in character with the area, or be served adequately by essential public services, not create additional requirements, and not involve uses that are detrimental. All special uses have to meet those. But then some of them have additional specific standards. For example, a church. Now, if you live on a subdivision street, you don't really want a church going in a house next door to you. You want it to be in a bigger property on a bigger street. So those are the specific standards for that. Same thing with daycare. So that's a little bit of an idea of the differences between those allowed by right or those with a special use permit. So we have two bodies that basically administer the zoning for the township, and that's the Planning Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals. Both bodies have adopted their meeting procedures that regulate public comments and how they conduct their meetings. Decisions are always and only based on the standards of the ordinance, and that is it. If they meet the standards, they get approved. If they don't meet the standards, they don't get approved. My friends always say to me, why are you letting another pizza place come in? Why are you letting another oil change place come in? Well, the point is, if they are in the district where the use is allowed and they meet the standards, we have to allow them. We can't say we don't want another pizza place. So we always, every decision that we make based on our zoning applications are always based only on our standards in the ordinance, and also general standards. We can apply those as well. If the site plan provides all the elements as listed in the ordinance and complies with everything, and the use is allowed in the district, the site plan must be approved. About 5 years ago, the township reviewed the ordinance big time, and we took out a lot of the uses that used to be special uses, and now we have them approved just for the site plan. And because there's no discretion, we actually brought those in-house to be administratively approved, which is more user-friendly to the businesses, because we approve those, 2 to 4 days max, and they're out the door. They don't have to wait for a planning commission meeting. So let's see. Additional options or ideas may be presented to the applicant, and the applicant may choose to comply if we say, hey, it would really be nice if you put extra landscaping in this area, but they only basically have to meet the minimum standards. Conditions of approval may be added if they're reasonable and intended to protect natural resources, public health, safety, and welfare, related to a valid exercise of police power, and necessary to meet the intent and purpose of the ordinance related to the standards established in the ordinance, and necessary to ensure compliance with standards. So for example, somebody came on the site plan and you're required to have 1 tree for every 25 feet of your width, and you have 110 feet of width, then you'd be required to have 5 trees. And if they only show 4 trees, well, we can approve it and say with the condition that you add an extra tree. And all of our development comes with the condition that they have to get a stormwater drain permit. Nobody on our staff is an engineer for water, so we basically rely on the Ottawa County Water Resources Commission. So every development has a condition of approval that they have to get the stormwater drain permit from the Ottawa County Water Resources. But basically, the only time we can add conditions, which you will see on the PUD, is if it helps them to meet the ordinance, and if it shows in the future that they will meet the ordinance by complying with those conditions. Okay, the Planning Commission Zoning Board of Appeals hold the public hearings, and they give citizens an opportunity to be heard and to provide relevant facts and opinions that may help in the decision making. The role of the decision makers is to take into account the welfare of the entire community, not just those who show up at a public hearing. Let me tell you something. If somebody's happy with what you're doing, they're not going to come here and tell you. But if they're not happy, they will come. That's just kind of the way it is. So if an application comes on your agenda and people are not happy about it, they're going to be coming in. But it's your job as well as the Planning Commission's job to take that as input. But you have to still use the standards, and you can use their input to help determine if they meet the standards. But basically, it's not people coming in who are opposed, it's do they meet the standards, does their application meet the standards. So it's not a reason for denial just because a room full of people show up to oppose the project. Approvals or denials must be thoroughly supported and clearly stated how the ordinance standards were met or were not met. And I wanted to make a note on staff reports, just so that you all understand what they are. We do staff reports basically for the Planning Commission, and then we give you those staff reports too. And what we want to show you in the staff report is, we want to show you all the relevant information. We'll give you some background, some history, maps, pertinent ordinance sections, and then we want to tell you how this application meets the standards or doesn't meet the standards. So that's basically what a staff report is. So we will tell you, okay, like for example, if if sidewalks are required in a plat, we're gonna tell you sidewalks are required. But we don't want you to think that as soon as they put in their street, they're gonna put in sidewalks. We want you to know that the sidewalks go in when an individual house goes in. And that kind of falls into the schedule of, they get their building permit application, then within 6 months afterwards, they have to put in their lawn and their sidewalks. So we're telling you that we know that's gonna go in, we're telling you we're gonna make sure that it goes in. So basically, that's what the staff report is. Okay, so the role of the public at a public hearing is only to provide information to the decision maker. The Planning Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals' job is to review an application as per the standards, not based on the opinion of those who attend a meeting. Note that board members normally only hear from people who are unhappy with a denial or an approval, and you don't usually hear from those who are happy with the denial. So it might seem that there are a lot of denials, but really, if they meet the standards, they won't be denied. Okay, preparation. The Planning Commission and ZBA members should visit the site and may go on the property, because we have some language on all of our applications, that when an applicant signs that application, they're giving any of you, any township staff or officials, the permission to go on the property. So if somebody comes in for an application, you have the right to go on that property. But because of that Open Meetings Act, it's not appropriate to talk to the person, because then you're getting extra information that everybody else doesn't have. That's called ex parte contact, and it's a violation of the Open Meetings Act. And the intent of gathering information is to ensure that everybody has all of the same information. And if it can't be avoided, then just report it to the people at your meeting. And then there's called conflict of interest. Like, for example, if you owned a company and your company was coming in for a variance, that would be a conflict of interest, and then you would recuse yourself. Okay, applications and planning commission reviews. Site plans for the Zoning Enabling Act, it's a document and drawings required by the zoning ordinance to ensure that a proposed land use or activity is in compliance with the zoning ordinance and other laws and ordinances. There's no public hearing for a site plan. Approvals or denials are solely based on ordinance standards. Straight site plan for uses allowed by right, again, are administratively approved because there's no discretion. And another little note here, we don't deny site plans. What we do is we say, we give it back to the person who applied, and we said, okay, your setbacks don't meet the ordinance requirements, so revise it and bring it back in. We don't just deny it. We just keep telling them over and over again, this is what you need to do. We don't approve it until they submit a site plan that meets the ordinance. Rezonings and ordinance amendments. Now remember, the zoning ordinance and map are one document, so basically that's the same action. Their review and decisions are recommended by the Planning Commission, where the public hearings are held, and then acted upon the board. The rezonings are changes to the zoning map and are reviewed using the 3 C's in the ordinance, which your next meeting, you are going to have 3 applications for rezonings on there. So you'll see, is it consistent with the master plan? Is it capable of being used for the uses? And is it compatible with the area? So we're going to give that to you, and we're going to give you our opinion on if it does meet those standards. And then you'll be the ones, the Planning Commission will review, hold a public hearing, give you a recommendation, and then you will determine if you concur with that recommendation. Okay, so, okay, and ordinance amendments are changes to the zoning ordinance text. And revisions can be initiated by the Planning Commission, and they regularly are. Planning Commission all the time comes up with ideas of things that need to be changed. Or actually, it can be brought by the liaison from the Zoning Board of Appeals, which that's going to happen because we just had a Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, and they determined that they're going to bring a possible ordinance change to the Planning Commission. Or the board, if let's just say people bring information to you and say, we really think that we should have X, Y, Z. So you'll talk about it, and then what you can do is you can initiate it or refer it to the Planning Commission. If you refer to the Planning Commission, then you can just, give them your ideas and say, could you please review this for us? And then a resident also has the opportunity to submit an application and pay to have you review a zoning ordinance change. Okay, a PUD, you're going to have one of these on your agenda today, and it's really a really very good developmental tool because it's flexible. Okay, so if somebody wants to put a commercial building and they have to meet the setbacks for the commercial district. But if somebody comes in with a PUD, it's flexible zoning. They can say, okay, we're gonna ask you if we can have a little bit shorter setbacks, and then maybe we're gonna use our open space for something else, like Lowing Woods. You all know where Lowing Woods is? They have smaller front yard setbacks, rear yard, side yards, but then they have open space. They have a pool, they have other open areas for the use of the whole, small community there. The one that we're gonna see tonight is, in fact, we've got our applicant here with us, and it's for the old Kmart site. So he's got a proposal, and you're gonna look at that and determine if you concur with the development. But to be a PUD, it's a win-win for the township and the developer, because in place of some of the things that we grant deviations for, they provide to the community some other good things that we want. They're gonna have more landscaping, more walking paths. They're gonna have coordinated architecture, so the whole area kind of matches, looks like it goes together. So that's really a nice thing. We really like PUDs. It's a good way for us to get a really good development, and it's a good way for the developer to get a development that they want as well. So I'm gonna go over that a little bit, just that staff report, because, so that when that does come up on your agenda, then I can kind of explain a little bit of what some of that means to you. Okay, another application is the preliminary plat, which is the subdivision of land into lots that meet minimum standards. And there's 3 steps to this process, which you will be acting on these regularly, because we have a lot of development going on. But the preliminary layout, that's the number 1 step. They come in, that goes to the planning commission, there's a public hearing there, they review it. Do all of the sites meet, all of the lots meet, setbacks, all of our minimum requirements? Okay, so we give you a staff report and we tell you how it meets the standards. What we also tell you how it's going to meet the standards in the future. Like, for example, your sidewalks. We tell you that they have to put the sidewalks in. Or we also tell you, which, Mike is on the ZBA, Michael, you're on the ZBA, so you know that we also mention about easements, the drainage easement. So if your rear yard is a drainage easement, this was created by the developer. So they can't come in and say, well, you know what, I need to put my swimming pool in my front yard because I can't put it in my rear yard. Well, no, this was a creative situation, which means we have it on record that then they don't meet the standard for getting a variance to have their swimming pool in the front yard. Okay, there's 3 steps. The first one is the preliminary plat. That goes to the planning commission and then comes to you. The next step is the final preliminary, which that's the construction. And that requires approval from the road commission and the Ottawa County Road Commission and Ottawa County Water Resources Commission. They pay their lot inspection fees, and that one is only board action. So we look at that when that comes in, make sure that they still have the lots that meet the minimum sizes, we make sure they have their approval letters. We take care of all the things that are required before we put it on your agenda. So, I mean, if you want us to tell you what was done for that, otherwise you can know, if it ever shows up on your agenda, that it meets all of those requirements. Then the last step is the final plat. After construction, and that shows the final lot sizes, minimum building opening, and then after they get this approval, they have to go to the state to get approval from the state. But it's at that point that they can start submitting building permit applications. Okay, so I mentioned the stormwater drain permit. That's from Ottawa County Water Resources, and that is required in our general ordinance, which is a stormwater drain ordinance. And then our DPW, our Department of Public Works, regulates utilities, and you'll see again, even in tonight, that they have to coordinate with, that's a condition of approval. So they don't necessarily coordinate with them right now at the beginning, they're gonna coordinate it after they get the approval to proceed. A lot of these developments want their initial approval before they spend a lot of money with engineering to move to the next step. Okay, also the fire department reviews all the development as well. Okay, so this is the one that's going to be on your agenda, so I thought, why not use that for an example, maybe give you a little bit of an idea. So we have the site plan, we have multiple site plans, and then they also provided like the elevations of the building. And this is to show you that it meets the coordinating requirement for the architecture. So you can see they all have coordinating elements. They're not identical, they don't have to be identical. They have to have like a coordinating theme. So you can see that they have that. Now, the staff report to the Planning Commission was also included in your packet. And the purpose of that report was to provide the Planning Commission with information related to compliance, the ordinance standards and its requirements. But we also provide some historical and other background information. And because a lot of times, I don't know about you, but for me, if I know the history of why something is, it helps me understand where we're going in the future. The report specifically details all the ordinance standards and how the proposal relates to these standards, including the strict qualifying conditions that must be met. There are some qualifying conditions. A minimum size has to be owned by the same person, has to have open space, has to have paths. So it has to meet those qualifying conditions. So we're going to give you that information, and some of them is going to be in the future, like the utilities. That's not something that they have already right now, or they may have some of them, but that's something that we are going to enforce in the future. So we want you to know that that standard is met. So the best thing about a PUD is it's flexible with the rigid, regular requirements. And the staff report that was given to you for tonight includes the details of the request, so you understand exactly what they're planning. Maps, including zoning and future land use maps, so you know what it looks like on our zoning map, and you also know then the information if it complies with the master plan. That's one of the qualifying conditions. It has to be consistent with the master plan. And then, like we said before, it's not rigid. There's some flexibility. So what they do is they give us a deviation table, and that lets you know the areas that they're not meeting the strict regulations. So then you can look at that and you can say, okay, in place of, they're giving us extra open space, extra pathways, this coordinated development, but they want something in return. They want 4 stories. They want to have less parking. And on that note, let me just mention something to you about the parking. A PUD is also a really good thing for parking, because you don't want a sea of asphalt. So if a commercial building goes in, they're required to have so many parking places, but in a PUD, they can share the parking. So for example, they have a proposed restaurant for the future, and they have a proposed office building. Well, the office building is going to be busy from 8 to 5. The restaurant's probably going to be busy starting at 5 o'clock and on weekends and holidays and that type of thing. So a PUD is another good reason, so we can not have that big sea of asphalt, but they can share the parking. And so that was one of their deviations that they're requesting. It gives you, and also, okay, so we give you in the staff report a detailed explanation. But you don't have to read that if you don't want to. You can just read the summary and just read the high points. It's up to you. But the details let you know how we got to the point in the summary. So then we also give you options for motion. So we gave them for the Planning Commission. And also for the options for the motion, it ties the approval to the specific plans. Because with a PUD, it's its own zoning district. So when you approve a PUD, it's a PUD zoning, but it's based on that preliminary plan. So they can't get this approval and then tomorrow come in and put in condos, because they don't have approval for that. Their rezoning to PUD is based on this preliminary plan. So we tie it directly to that plan. Okay, okay, and the Planning Commission and you as well will take information from the staff report, and that doesn't mean that this is gospel. You can say, well, you know, I agree with that, but I think that they should do this or this or this, and that's fine. That's what the Planning Commission does as well. And you can see, if you read the staff report and looked at the minutes, they did change a couple little things. Also, the staff report, when you make a motion, you'll see in your proposed motion always says to adopt the staff report as finding of fact. And the reason is, so that becomes part of the record then. So the staff report then and the information in the staff report becomes part of your minutes. The Planning Commission holds a public hearing and makes a recommendation to the board for the rezoning based on the preliminary overall plan. And then the Planning Commission approves the final development plan. Okay, so the staff report for this PUD coming before you shows how each section of the PUD ordinance and how the proposal complies. And then we provide you a summary. summary lets you know what are the deviations. Well, you can see the deviation was having a hotel. And allow the height of the hotel to have 4 stories, to have less parking, and to have a smaller front yard setback in front of Dunkin' Donuts. The reason for that is because that was existing before and it's not conforming. But we're gonna include this in it, that's gonna take away the non-conforming status. And then the rear setback, our ordinance requires green belts whenever you have commercial use adjacent to residential use. Well, there's quite a bit of land back there with all natural types of things, so they were asking the township to accept what's there, the natural buffer, to be the buffer rather than putting in, planting more trees. Okay, and then, conditions of approval, we are gonna ask for conditions of approval for you all to approve the conditions of approval, and then we make sure those conditions of approval are satisfied before they come in with their first building permit or application for land split or whatever. We will make sure that those conditions are fulfilled. So, one of the ones was the bond for the pedestrian bike path, and they have actually already provided that, so that's been covered. And then they have to bring their utilities to the site, and they're gonna organize that with the DPW department, and we will make sure that that's taken care of. They need their stormwater drain permit for each building, and we want that, the township wants that, because we wanna make sure their stormwater is all managed before they start building. And then they're required to have a recorded PUD agreement. Every PUD has a recorded PUD agreement. So they are recording this agreement that they are gonna build this as they're telling us they're gonna build it. And that is good, unless they come in the future for a revised PUD, which you're actually gonna see one of those coming up in a couple months as well. And then they'll have to submit a revised PUD agreement. Okay, and then I thought another example I give you quick is the Allward Estates that you already saw. On your next meeting, you're gonna have the final preliminary for Allward Estates. But I thought I'd just go over the staff report, just so that you know, when you see this, what it means. So the staff report gives you the complete details of the request, gives you a map, and then a checklist with corresponding statements in the summary, and I'm gonna show you that. So a summary from the details contained in the graph, it has corresponding letters, so you can go there and see what we mean by that. An option for the motion which ties the approval to the specific plans, includes conditions of approval, along with the adoption of the staff report as finding of fact. And the planning commission takes the elements provided in the staff report to make their own decision and may occasionally deviate. They take our information. I mean, they don't have to blindly go along with what we say. They can say, well, wait a minute, I disagree with that. And they have done that in the past. The planning commission has, and the board as well. So this is the checklist that you will get in most of your staff reports. And you can see that those are the things that remind us, okay, this is what we have to look for. And then if there's something we want to tell you, we put a note in it. So we give you the summary, and then we'll explain to you what we mean by that. What we're doing basically is we're telling you how that proposal meets the ordinance. Then we give you the option for the motion. Okay, and then we also have the Zoning Board of Appeals. The state law recognizes that you can come up with this nice zoning ordinance and your zoning map, but you can't anticipate every single situation. So they give the Zoning Board of Appeals, so a resident or business owner has the opportunity to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and ask for relief from the requirements of the zoning ordinance. However, it can't just be willy-nilly and, I really like you, so I'm gonna let you do whatever you want. There has to be standards that have to be met. And those standards have to be met for each application, and that's how we have to be fair. We have to be fair and act in good faith, so we use those. So, when ordinances are adopted, they're in effect for everyone and every property owner within the entire township. However, both the Zoning Enabling Act and the zoning ordinance recognizes that although much thought is put into crafting these ordinances, there may be occasions that don't fit the ordinance. Consideration may be given to grant a variance from the requirements of the ordinance when those specific standards are met. And they're incorporated into our zoning ordinance, and they come directly from the state law. And they're required to be met. And it's because we want to treat everybody equally and consistently. So the role of the ZBA is to hear and decide upon appeals from any order or decision made by the zoning administrator and administration of the ordinance. If somebody doesn't like any decision that we make here, they can go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. But basically, the day-to-day operations are the responsibility of the zoning administrator. Okay, to interpret the provisions of the ordinance or classify a use that is not mentioned in the zoning ordinance, and then to authorize upon appeal specific variances from the requirements of the ordinances when they meet all those standards. Okay, if somebody wants to have their accessory building 3 feet from the property line instead of 5 feet. Well, their whole backyard is a ravine and they have one small spot, so if we can make sure that they meet the standards, then they're granted variance. Note that it's not the role of the ZBA to write, adopt, or review zoning ordinances, or attempt to change an ordinance, even if they don't like it or agree with the ordinance. So if the ZBA doesn't like an ordinance, they have a liaison on the board, and they can, or liaison on the zoning board of appeals, and they can bring that back to planning commission or the township board and say, I don't like this ordinance. In fact, Michael did just that a few years ago when somebody came in for a rear yard setback in an industrial district, and they wanted to have 20 feet instead of 40. Well, they were adjacent to another industrial district, so that was brought to the planning commission, brought to the board, and now it's changed to the ordinance. So while the application did not meet the standards for variance, it made sense, and so we just changed the ordinance. Okay, note that a majority of the membership must be present, and a majority of the membership must vote to grant a variance. So there's 5 members, 3 have to vote yes. You can have a minimum of 3 there, but it's obviously the advantage of the applicant to have more there in case somebody votes no. Okay, membership includes a representative from the board and from the planning commission. Okay, so even if it does not meet the standards, it should not be granted. But if you think it's still right, then maybe we should change the ordinance to be fair for everybody. Okay, I already told you about Ellen Boss, and then another one was many years ago when Baldwin was widened, it made all the signs up and down Baldwin non-conforming. Well, we don't want everybody to leave their old non-conforming signs up that need maintenance and need repair and that need to be fixed or replaced. So we changed the ordinance. So we allow those signs now, as long as they meet everything else, to be located in the spot where they are. Okay, reminder, members should visit the site, but should refrain from any conversation with the applicant outside of the publicly noticed meetings, because that's a violation of the Open Meetings Act. And for consideration, the ZBA should gather the facts, read through the applications, the ordinance requirements, history, staff reports, look at the master plan, look at the physical characteristics of the property and surrounding area, get input from the people at the public hearing. But remember, that's just to help you understand the situation. And it's only fair if we use the same standards for everyone. If a variance comes in and does not meet those standards, the zoning board of appeals does not have the authority to grant the variance. Okay, and it's not the job of the ZBA to try to help the applicant to find a way around to avoid an inconvenience. Already, both the planning commission and zoning board of appeals have sections in the ordinance that require the applicants to come and meet with us for a pre-application meeting. And we will do everything we can to figure out a way to help them accomplish what they want to accomplish by meeting the standards of the ordinance. Because the ordinance is going to lose its integrity if every time they come in here, and if somebody wants something and just give them a variance, well, why should anybody do it? Then they just would come in and get a variance. Okay, these are the standards. I'm not going to read through them, but if those are the standards that have to be met. Okay, sorry I was talking fast, but I wanted to get through a lot of this stuff, and if you have any questions,
Thank you, Matt. Very good, very thorough. Questions, board members?
I have a question for you. You mentioned, and it was in our documents too, that we would have to be provided with a recorded PUD agreement. I'm just curious, where is that recorded? Is that at the Register of Deeds?
yes.
So that gets recorded before we've even approved it though?
No, that's a condition of approval. And so that's what I was saying. We make sure the condition of approval will be they have to provide that before they either get a building permit application or submit their building permit application or submit a land split application, which you'll see that coming up in your motion for your PUD. It's going to say the recorded PUD agreement must be submitted, the same thing with a stormwater drain permit, prior to either submitting a building permit application or land split application. So when they come in with either one of those, we pull up the minutes of the meeting that you all approve. We say, okay, these are the things that you have to do, and we make sure that they've done them before we approve the zoning on any application.
So between the PUD being officially approved, the plan for that, and then when they go to get their first building permit, if that's when they record it?
No, they can go record it mean, they can record it anytime. I mean, they know that they need to do it, and if they wanna move forward, they're gonna do it as quickly as they can, but they have to wait until you act on it, because you're gonna give them the conditions of approval, which have to be included in that agreement. So, for instance, tonight, after you approve it, our applicant is probably going to get his PV agreement as quickly as he can, so he can move forward.
Right.
I think you meant if there, right, Annette?
Oh, yeah.
Did you, do you happen to know, there were a lot of legal provisions that you summarized in there, that was pretty awesome, you kind of jam-packed it all in. Do you happen to know, the ex parte communications thing, where in there it said that?
In the open, in the.
In the Open Meetings Act.
You mean, I don't know the law by heart.
Okay, I didn't know if you had a note there or anything, so,
Yeah, I mean, this is just something that we learn going to classes and seminars and reading, that we are not, the deciding, okay, like, when the applicant comes in to us, we get all the information we can and then we provide it to you. But if you are talking individually with them, then it's information just you have that everybody else doesn't have. So, all the deliberations and discussions are required to take place like in an open meeting, so everybody can hear something that's going, whatever conversation that you have. But I don't know the section of the law.
it just seems to put up I trust that's exactly what you've been trained in, it just, the thing that struck me was that it just seems that it's a wall being put up in between when a constituent, asks something of us, or, wants access to us, that we'd have to say, oh, wait, you gotta do that at a public meeting.
Well, wait a minute, that's for the zoning board of appeals. I mean, and for the planning commission. I mean, like, you all, and I guess I'm gonna defer to Dan for that, but I think that you all have the authority to go talk to anybody anytime you want. But it would be inappropriate and a violation of the law if a member of the zoning board of appeals went to somebody's house and said, okay, show me what you want, why you're doing this. I mean, you can go there and look at it, but to have a conversation, that would be the violation.
Yeah, that's a question I always had too, as being a CBA member. If there's not information in a staff report, and I'm doing a site visit and I have questions, asking questions is one thing. Conversation is a different thing. So if you're getting feedback and input, you can ask questions and share those with the ZBA members once you return.
Or you can always let us
Otherwise,
know.
you leave out with all of this, like, well, you sure hope the staff found out all the questions you had and did the due diligence, because I can't ask you anything once you engage in that conversation, is that correct?
You're going in an area where there's things that are law and there's things that the way you should act. I'm not just saying the law is perfectly clear, but the zoning board of appeals is supposed to be more like a judge. You're hearing evidence presented to you, and so, yes, you can't avoid, if you're saying, hi, how are you? You can't avoid some of the things, but you're not supposed to do like an investigation where you're getting an investigation and then the other members don't have access to that information. The applicant is supposed to give you the information you need, and the public can then bring the information to you as well. So you're supposed to ask those questions here or to the applicant, or have staff ask the applicant, so the entire zoning board can have it when they're making their kind of judicial decision. So that they function a little bit differently when they're handling an appeal. So I don't know, does that answer your question? Is there a law specifically prohibiting it? I'm not saying there is.
Right. And it could always be done, ZBA member could go to staff and say, get a hold of the applicant and
I have
here's
to,
a list of questions.
yeah, the applicant should provide us this information you need. If they don't give you the information you need, you aren't necessarily issuing the appeal until you have the information you need.
Do you track how much property has been developed? So you're talking about 2021 redoing the master plan. Of course, as Georgetown boundaries are already set, the property continues to be less and less has to be developed. So there's not a lot of room for a master plan. So if it's been, was it 4 years, you said?
5 years.
5 years?
Yeah.
We certainly have developed a lot of property in the last 5 years. So there's got to be less and less property that
Right.
decisions can be made on as far as master plan. I know there's some of the outskirting areas, but
Except that people are coming in regularly for renovations and changes, and you're gonna see a zoning request for some property up here by Grand Valley that was initially zoned HDR, and they wanted to go to commercial. So we do use this though for redevelopment as well. So with everybody participating in this, we really use our master plan a lot. So we put a lot of thought into this when we do this. What we'll be doing, we'll meet with all the boards and commissions. What we'll be doing through the planning commission, we will be going section by section and talking about it, discussing it. And then minutes are kept, so you'll know, well, why did we decide to do this here? Why did we change this here, for the future? I mean, basically, what you're saying is true, except that, we still want to know for the future in case somebody wants to change it. I mean, if it's all developable here, obviously, in the heart of the township right here, that's all houses, that's gonna stay out there. That's not gonna go anywhere.
So when you're doing that, do you confer with like Glendon Township and Allendale Township on the borders?
We follow all the requirements in the law, yes. In fact, when we have our meeting, we'll give everybody the steps of everything that has to take place. There's requirements in the law. We have to notify all of our adjacent municipalities. We have to hold public hearings. We have to give them copies of it. We have to give them, I think it's 60 days to respond to us with comments. We're going to actually start this in January 20th, the Planning Commission meeting, because we have the superintendent from Hudsonville Public Schools coming to tell us about their new school that they're going to be doing, putting up on 36 Baldwin. So we want to find that out, because right now, we probably have, whatever that is, it may be a more rural area, but we might want to listen to what he has to say and then change this accordingly, because we know they're going to do what they're going to do.
Well, the public school can do whatever they want. They don't have to do anything. Planning doesn't mean a whole lot to them, so.
No, but the adjacent land, we want to know what they're doing, so we want to know what we want to do with the area around.
Okay, I understand that, but I'm just saying the public schools, they're by the state.
They're immune from zoning.
They are.
Anyone else?
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
If you would, and thank you for being so thorough and accessible to us outside of even meetings like this. Would you send that presentation as a PDF maybe to the board?
Well, I can probably attach it right to the minutes if you'd like.
Sure. That'd be great.
Okay.
Good.
That'd be nice.
Okay?
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right. Very good. We're going to move on. By the way, I should probably say, because I received a couple of emails to this effect, that we are socially distanced here, and some question not knowing the distance between us. Normally we have 7 people up here, we have 5, and we are 6 feet spaced. So just I make note of that for anyone watching at home. All right. Number 7, communication letters and reports received for information. Item 8, the very public hearing that Annette has been referring to, having to do with Wolverine Building Group, for which Mike Hausman is here this evening. And so we're going to hold a public hearing to begin with about this, and we're going to need a motion to open that public hearing. So,
Support.
supported. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, so the public hearing on this PUD is now open. Does anyone from the public here tonight wish to address this item on the agenda? If so, step forward and state your name. Okay. Seeing none, we need a motion then to close the public hearing. So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, so the public hearing is now closed. We now move as a board to address the staff report and the findings and decision whether or not to adopt the resolution. So is there a motion to place that before us for consideration for resolution? So moved.
Support.
Move to support is now before you. I'll just say, I know Mr. Hausman has come. He may have come simply to be here if you have questions, or it may be that the board's wish to have him step forward and perhaps give his synopsis from his point of view as the developer. Is that something that the board would desire? Otherwise, we'll utilize him as a resource for any questions you may have. So, all right. I'm hearing that.
Well, depending, so in sorting out the there were three things, I guess, stuck out at me as concerns that were raised by members of that commission. And from the minutes, it didn't look like any of those were really addressed. So one of them, the individual's here, so I kind of, I'd like to know, from Gary, if the question was addressed, and if not, then to have him step forward and, possibly answer it, but if so, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's perfectly appropriate, that's great, these are eyes and ears here on that
Gary,
commission.
the question that I saw, or concern I saw you raise that was in the minutes, talks about parking is a little tight, but not just speaking to the number of spaces. Of course, the number of spaces, depending on how you look at the code or ordinance, it would either be 465 spaces or 420. I personally agree with the 420, but I see that there's at least two different ways to read that. But my understanding is you're not necessarily talking about that, but also, or more so about the design, because you reference doing a lot of work in Ada Village, and my understanding is perhaps you were talking about the oh gosh, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that, when they redid their entire area, and so they had to go through the whole parking, redesigning, and out of that, your experience with that, you believe that deliveries will be tough, especially for restaurants, you didn't see any areas for deliveries at all. I have the same concern, and I actually had sat in on several of the Ada, I lived in that area back then, so I sat in on several of the Ada Planning Commission and DDA and whatnot meetings about that very development before it happened. So, I'm glad that was your experience, because I could connect with that, and I could see it in my mind, but were those questions answered for you with the
They
subsequent?
were. So, and if I'm wrong, Mike, you can step up, but, so one of the things we ran into with parking is, the way the zoning ordinance is written. It's written according to 2 and 3 bedroom units, which is kind of unusual for, a hotel. So we feel that zoning, needed to be addressed as far as how many parking spots. So what they did is they went back to the Granville zoning ordinance where they have more hotels. It's our first hotel in Georgetown. And Granville has more hotels, they have like 7 or 8. And we use their, how many parking spots. But also, because it's a PUD, she addressed that too, there's a lot of shared parking that can be done there too, between the restaurants and there's a retail store there, I believe, and then Aldi's is part of that. So there's probably ample parking spots for it, I believe. And then the loading and unloading, now one of the guys, this is my first meeting to the planning commission, but one of the guys that's on the planning commission has connections either in his business with restaurants and that type of thing. And he said loading docks are not used at restaurants, they're usually done with a lift on the back of the truck. So, I only brought it up because of the fact that, yes, in Ada Village, there's some tight corners in there, and they seem to navigate it okay, but it's just something I brought up just because I had experience and I witnessed what's going on there. But from what I've been told by the other planning commission members who are more familiar with that type of business, I'm in construction, they're in the restaurant business, or associated with the restaurant business, they said they didn't see it as a problem. Parking spots, the same thing, they do not see that as a problem according to other hotels and other parking spots that have according to the density of the hotel itself. I did bring it up to Victor about cleaning up maybe that, maybe he talked to you about that too, about cleaning up the ordinance as it's written right now, because this is kind of written more for an apartment than it is for a hotel. Because they have parking spaces per bedroom. 2-bedroom has so many spots, and a 3-bedroom has so many spots. Well, there's no 3-bedroom hotel, so I know. But Mike, you're more than happy to step in here if I'm wrong, but that's the way I understood the conversation that we had at the planning commission.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah, he nailed it pretty much. The one thing I want to mention about deliveries was that, Manette and her staff, they're awesome, and we have to put, truck turning templates on our drawings to show that deliveries can be made. We often have to identify a delivery spot, and the fire department, I'm sure, looks at it as well. So hit the nail on the head. Thank you.
If you don't mind, there were 2 other, I just wanted to, there's a lot going on here, so.
Oh, yeah,
For other two concerns that were raised by planning commission members were, one was about that, and I think it was maybe more recently, and I've noticed this as well, but how Taco Bell's drive-through, the cars are backing up into Rush Creek Street. So it seems to be causing a problem, and I think there was a comment in there that, perhaps with restaurants being closed for dine-in service, you see a lot more fast food. Unfortunately, who knows how long, I mean, a 3-week pause was a 3-week pause, so I don't know how long that would be, so I don't know how long that might affect that area. Was there any further discussion that might kind of develop?
There really wasn't. I happen to know the operator, and Tony, who is partner with me on this PUD, owns the building. So we've already talked to the operator about it, and it is from COVID. Everybody's going through the drive-thru. Everybody loves Taco Bell. If it happens to persist, the COVID and all that going on, there's a way we're looking at rerouting so we have more stacking. But if you saw the remodel we did last year with Rush Creek Road in the back of Taco Bell, we actually added a significant amount of stacking. And how COVID hit, doesn't even help. So we're going to continue to address it, but nothing was decided at the meeting. So because it's not part of the PUD, the Taco Bell is not.
Okay. And this last one was, I'm just going to read it so there's context, I'm not taking it out of context. In his experience within his line of work, he's generally seen extended stay hotels that are in the later stages of building's life turn into long-term rentals to lower income, and stated in places that he's worked with people on the sex offenders list tend to congregate in these areas, believes this could be a problem in the future, and it looks like the response was kind of like, well, that can happen, but there's not really much to mitigate that as an issue. Is there anything else that maybe was discussed about that?
Not much, other than, it's difficult for me or for Tony to say this home 2 suite's going to be blight in 50 years. What I had mentioned in there was, it really is more of a product of the community itself and what's happening in the surrounding areas. And probably shouldn't give examples, but you drive down 94 towards Chicago, you used to go past some Michigan cities where the hotels, they're just look like crap. So I know exactly what you're talking about, but we have Tony Maselli who's going to invest like $15 million in a hotel. He's not in his lifetime or mine are we going to let it go to blight, but at some point it's out of our control.
Does and maybe it was in there, or maybe it's not even to that stage of things yet, but the design of the building for the hotel itself, is it set up so that, like, in a typical hotel, you'll have some common areas, you'll have a lobby, for example, you'll have, maybe a workout room, things like that. Does this hotel seem to have some of those community elements in it?
It definitely has the workout facility. It has a little breakfast nook where you get your free breakfast in the morning if they happen to serve it as part of the rental. They have 2 small meeting rooms and an exercise room. And I don't know if he's proposing a pool for this one or not. He's doing one just like it at 64th and Byron Center. And it's just the foundation is in right now, and that one will have a pool.
Have you, by any chance, ever been in the one that is off of Clyde Park? It's not the same brand, it's I don't know what it's called. But you can see it right from 131. It's in between Clyde Park and 131, between 44th and 52nd Street. There's like a Fox car dealership or whatever.
It's not popping in.
Okay. I bring that up because back when I moved to this area, houses were flying off the market like they're on style. And we bid on 5 before we could get one. And we ended up selling our house in Bellay, and we were homeless. And we lived in that for 2 of the weeks with all our kids and preparing for trials. It was great.
And you survived.
I did. And I don't mean any disrespect to that particular facility, but it looks fine. I mean, it looks like, you mentioned the ones on the way to Chicago that might look run down or something.
Yep.
I wouldn't say this looked run down. The facility itself looked clean. When you walked in, and this was before COVID, you walked in in, and there's no lobby, there's just a little tiny window, like the gas stations in Chicago. A little tiny window that you can have like pass stuff through to get your key or whatever. And then there's nothing for common areas. And not that that's a bad thing, but it didn't take us very long to notice. And in those communities, or hotels, typically, the people staying there take out their own trash and things like that. We learned very quickly not to have our teenagers take out the trash because there were a lot of drug deals and things going on in the back where you take out your trash, and there's a lot of questionable activities. And you mentioned it could be a product of the community. Could be. Quite honestly, just in the amount of time we stayed there, we just didn't see as much of that as we saw, like, in there. And so I kind of wondered if part of it is that the kind of people you will attract to it will, people who are maybe looking for a place that has a pool or a place that, and for us it was the middle of summer, so we would love a pool, but we didn't have much notice that we were doing this. But if it has a pool or if it has, a nice lobby when you walk in, it doesn't have to have marble floors, but just a place where people, are treated like, you know what I mean? Like, I just wonder if some of those elements are going to purposely be designed into that so that in the end, the people that would end up coming would end up being people that would be more like, in the community where, it's not fostering people that maybe don't care about having community and they're just kind of, you know what I mean?
I do. In fact, one thing to note, this is a Hilton Home 2 suite, which is, they have to maintain very high standards in the hotel industry to carry that brand and have that name. So they will be policed by Hilton. And you've stayed with Hiltons, they're very nice. So that's going to help a lot. Two, the market study here, as was mentioned earlier, you don't have a hotel. You also don't have a convention center or a concert venue or anything like that. But what you do need is a hotel to service the local businesses, to service the people that have friends coming in to visit from out of town, that type of thing. So we feel it's part of the community. So we're going to be attracting like-minded people to the community. They're either relatives of somebody that lives here, that are here for a short time, or they're businessmen that are coming here, and this is the closest place for them to stay to wherever they're traveling. So I personally can't see in 50 to 60 years that ever even being a chance to happen, but I won't be here, so I can't really guarantee anything. So,
Well, I was worried about, not so much 50 to 60 years from now, but like I said, that one that we stayed at was very new.
Yeah.
And it, was kind of shocking.
Yeah, that could be there's some unscrupulous operators out there too, but Hilton will not tolerate that. So, and I've seen what you guys have done with the gateway to Georgetown Township is gorgeous. We never want the monument coming in on Chicago Drive and on Baldwin Street. Since I started coming here, that's brand new, isn't it, on Baldwin?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Mike, and of course, we can envision still, those of us who live here while we drive by, you still somehow see the holograms of Kmart back there. So this is wonderful to see the progress. If you had to put something in the form of a timeline, I know this isn't germane specifically to this zoning, rezoning, but timeline-wise, how long before you see the site as PUD fully developed? And then also just give some enthusiasm as it relates to the green spaces and attractiveness in the pathways, which I think the public really enjoys and wants.
Yeah.
And I know the planning commission is zealously regarding the attributes of this, but just give a little pitch for why you believe in that as well.
Well, Annette gets all the credit. And your ordinance, she's been awesome to work with. You got your teaching in about an hour. I got mine over the last 2 years. So, but no, we're actually really excited about the site. Tony won't start that hotel until the other one's about to open, so that's probably a year away. And then the other two sites remaining to develop. Well, let me back up a little bit. The Aldi is already there, the existing Aldi, and that's going to be part of this PUD. And we have somebody that's going to take over that building. It's a local nonprofit called Hand to Hand. They feed underprivileged children, I think lunches and dinner, but I'm not sure. They will prepare them there, and Aldi has a say in who uses that property, so Aldi is very excited that that's going to be. The Dunkin' Donuts is already under construction. That had site plan approval under the C2 district. that's underway, and the road is in, those that travel that, I'm sure appreciate that, because before it was full of potholes. Dan and I were both getting calls all the time, but, so that's all done, and the streetlights are going in on that street, and, so, as soon as we can, we are talking to somebody for the building in the back, which is office retail, there would probably be more retail. I can't say who it is, but I did say at the planning commission that it is a hardware store, something I think the area needs, so it kind of depends on that activity, but we'd love to see this completed in the next 2 years. The restaurant, we got to see what COVID does to sit-down restaurants, but we don't, Tony's very adamant that it's a nice sit-down restaurant. It's not like a fast casual, I don't name names because I don't build for a lot of them, so that's not what we want here.
I just have one last question. I'm not sure if it's for you, because I couldn't tell who generated this, if it's a staff report or not. It's called Rush Creek Crossings Narrative.
We wrote that.
Okay.
That's part of the requirements. Yeah.
Okay, and I figured that's kind of why I was going to ask you for a sit down, but I don't know if it's just, perhaps the copy I'm looking at might have been cut off in some way, because it doesn't even end with a period, or maybe I just don't understand the context. But the very last thing on this document, it says proposed restrictions. An existing site condo exists for this development that identifies restrictions, covenants, et cetera, that will be part of the overall project as it develops into the future. Assuming that is the full sentence that just missed a period, what is, when you say that an existing site condo exists,
Well, I don't know if I'm going to explain this properly, or? Oh, okay. It's, so we have to be a site condo, we have to have a PUD. We have to have PUD approval to be a site condo. A site condo is a different way to sell lots or to sell property than like a plat. You heard Manette talk about a plat. That's a defined piece of property that you sell with a deed, and then under state law, you can also do it as a site condo. You can do that for homes too. You hear condo associations, that type of thing. So that's what he's referring to in that paragraph, so.
so I guess the part that I was confused about is that it said that it already exists, but doesn't the approval for the PUD have to come
That's
before?
correct, yes.
Okay, so you just have one in the works?
Yes, we did, yes.
Okay,
Actually, what it ended up happening is a car crash before the horse,
okay.
and that got recorded by an attorney, and it's sitting there, but it's not accepted by Georgetown Township until the land division, until the PUD agreement's in place and land division is done.
Now, so among the board for discussion or with one, yes.
I'll just say one quick question. I believe I'm referencing that there's only one request for a sign.
Correct.
And no interest on the east side of Main Street?
At this point, no. We talked to Tony about that. We may come back. I don't know if you guys noticed that big boulder that's over there.
And the little in-out signs that have been there for 50
Right.
years. Please take this out.
Yeah, we will. That's actually Tony's, but the boulder, we might want to move that if we can figure out. And just etch on there, Rush Creek. No advertisement for people in the PUD.
Is that limited to one, or businesses are limited to one sign? Currently our ordinances? Oh, okay, so that was one of the.
Yeah.
Well, could be more than one business, essentially.
Right, I think non-PUD, you're limited to one, correct?
not PUD, well, not really. I mean, you can have a
Say Meyer.
you can have a freestanding sign, and you can have a wall sign. You can have a wall sign on every street that, every face that fronts the street. Or you can divide your wall sign into two, or you can get rid of your freestanding sign and have no wall sign. So
It's a
you want
square footage requirement, right? It's just a square footage requirement, right? That you could divide up your, if you get 50 square feet, you could, okay. I do have, I don't necessarily have questions for him, but I do have comments or questions.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
But if anybody else does first.
My two thoughts are, number one, I love to see hand-to-hand pointing to people out in building. That makes me super excited. Hand-to-hand is a tremendous gift to Denison Public Schools. They fill bags, like cinch sack drawstring backpacks full of food lockers, on a weekly basis, bags full of food to be all of the child's, during school and after school snacks for the week, plus at least one meal for the family. And schools identify kids who need those, and then they get that, that weekly food delivery. So to, have them have their old always space for, more space to do that amazing ministry, I think is fantastic for them. And then my only other thought is that we had stayed at a Hilton Home 2 Suites in Bloomington, Indiana. My sister used to live down there, and so when we would go for long weekends and things, that's where we always stayed. And it is by far the nicest hotel that I've ever stayed at. And I was staying there usually solo with my 3 kids, 2 of whom were in diapers and washing bottles and everything in a hotel room is not ideal. And it was just the perfect kind of home away from home for a long weekend visiting family. So when I had read that that was the hotel that was planning on going in, I got excited for this community because I can picture them serving a really good niche in this community of like, parents coming into Georgetown to visit their children and grandchildren when like us, we don't have a guest room for grandparents to stay at. So if they come in from out of town, it has to be a day trip or they have to find someplace outside of Georgetown to stay right now. And I can see it filling that niche very well for this community, so I'm excited about this. So, I was looking for, I can't find it now, but one of the, concerns they had was with regard to, I want to say it's part of our zoning, requirements for PUDs, so maybe you would know off the top of your head, but, there was something to the effect of that, even though with the Taco Bell backing out situation, that property is not officially part of this, but it talks about basically, that in planning one of these, essentially from scratch, like where we're at right now on this stage, that there should be something that helps to alleviate the, that area of flow of traffic and parking. And so here there's already a concern that's not their fault, but it is going to be directly connected with the flow of traffic that will be coming in. Do you know what part, where that, it was somewhere in your report, I think, I can't find it.
Yeah, that's one of the qualifying conditions is traffic. That's one of the qualifying conditions.
Sure. Oh, I actually just, as page 7 of your report, it talks about that a PUD should integrate traffic calming techniques and traffic, to improve traffic flow. So, again, it's not like, you guys don't even have this built yet, so it's not your fault. But it's just something that there's already a concern there, just how do we can't ignore it, so I guess, I'm not sure what the exact answer would be other than if this were to be approved, I would be concerned that you have something in there that you do continue that conversation so that there's a tangible way to address it. So that basically 2 years from now, the township is, not going to show up all up in arms that, there's this huge issue or there's a lot of traffic accidents near the Taco Bell and the new hotel or something. It doesn't need to be the new 8th Avenue and 44th Street, situation. So whatever we can do to be responsible for that so that we're setting that ahead of time. And again, I don't know if there's something that maybe somebody else has more experience on that particular front would have as a suggestion. So I guess, if anybody has comments on that, I have something else that's not related to that, but otherwise, I think my only other concern, first of all, I think it's, I agree with Becky, hand to hand, and maybe I'm thinking of the wrong one because there's 2 that I used to, but I think hand to hand is the one that's run out of the Sarah Church, is that correct? Okay.
That's right.
So, I don't know if he's still doing it, Jordan's a great guy, who's my connection there. I worked at Wyoming Public Schools for several years, and they had the same program there. All of our students there were eligible essentially, and it was a blessing to them. So to provide, I'm assuming, the
sometimes I just give up on trying to go there because I forget exactly what little way I have to go to get there. So this, I think, being, and I don't know if it's gonna be set up that people would go there or not, but if it is, the way that you get there is fairly obvious and it's open, and so for people who are in need, to have a less complicated way of getting there is a good thing. I also like the resolution that seemed to be, arrived at through planning commission on parking and some of the other pieces there. That was a lot to kind of digest to see how it went from one transition to the next, but I agree with that. I think it was great. I applaud you from, I think it was you that had the initiative to kind of bring forth what Granville does and how their zoning ordinance is a little bit different, but it arrives at the same calculation.
I think that was staff here.
Oh, okay, well, I applaud you, whoever it was. I appreciated seeing that, and that it essentially comes to, some of those, anyway, it gave context for that. So I want to say that because I don't want to seem like I'm just, the person who's, I think the project is great. My concern, and I'd love discussion, especially from another attorney who might be in the room, but there's a couple of things with regard to our just kind of for ease of reference, page 8 of the, I think it's under staff report. It references our ordinance that talks about permitted uses, and essentially the response, I understand this one is not the wording of our ordinance, but the response put in here or suggestion or whatnot is that the hotel proposal could be determined to be consistent with the text of the master plan, which indicates commercial uses that typically serve the entire community. Looking at that in conjunction with the bottom of page 4, the very last sentence, that the planning commission should determine if a hotel meets the intent of the community. Unless it just didn't make it into the minutes, I'm not sure that that specific finding, so to speak, was in there. And then the reason why that's important, then I guess to put it in context, is page 7 at the top, page 7 of the same report. It references page 30 and 31 of the master plan language that talks about for planned unit developments, excuse me, how it has varying densities of residential along with possible commercial uses with flexible zoning requirements. And the thing that caught me about that is it's referencing residential, and this doesn't have any residential. And the reason why that's important is, I mean, so our state law, MCL 125.3503, is the specific statute that talks about being able to do the planned unit developments, and that you have to follow the requirements that are made to create the PUDs, excuse me. And in our requirements, we're talking about being able, it's essentially envisioned or codified as having something where it's a different, varying uses of residential, and then adding in commercial or adding in, whatever, restaurant or all the other pieces that are in here. The only thing that's kind of off from what our adopted procedures would be is that instead of residential, it has this long-term, hotel component. And several provisions of that statute go, keep referencing to that. So I understand that the nature of this, a PUD, is that it has flexible zoning requirements, and that's great. The problem I'm seeing is that the state law references 3 times in that same statute in different subdivisions that you have to go by what your requirements are that your township has adopted in the zoning ordinance in order to get a PUD approved. And it's referencing the residential component. But then the statute itself talks about the whole point, basically when you make that plan on how to approve these, it's talking about how it's going to provide better housing opportunities. as one of the things, like it talks about, you know, bring in jobs and improve the economy and things of that nature, but it's talking about providing better housing. So that's, I guess, where I'm at is I'm concerned with the fact that it's not, you know, the emphasis has been on that it's a hotel, that it's gonna be bringing in people that are temporary, which is by definition what a hotel is. And how can we reconcile that with this, because the flexibility we're supposed to have isn't in whether they meet their initial requirements, but rather in the conditions that we're setting for them, and then signage or some of those other things, parking and height. I think it was great how all that worked out. So I don't know, if anybody has any thought on it.
I'm going to ask Minetta or Dan if you wish to address that, and then I'm going to call for a vote, I think, after that. So does one of you respond to the concern?
Yeah, I was writing up. Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, I wrote down some notes as you were talking, and I think that they did address it because it was in the deviation table. That was one of the things that they recommended approval of. So I think the planning commission specifically was in favor of it. And just a thought, as you're saying that too, I'm kind of thinking in my mind, from my experience with zoning anyway, I would not determine a hotel or a motel to be a residential use. I would determine it to be a commercial use, even though the commercial part of it is people staying there. So, I know what you're saying in the law, and I think that, again, just from my experience, they're referencing the standards that we have in the ordinance, which we do, of how they can approve a PUD. And I think that would include, you know, our standards, your qualifying conditions, and all the things that they're supposed to do. I think that's what they're referring to. And another thought that I had when you were talking about the traffic could be signs, you know, some directional signs. And, you know, maybe they wouldn't even know where they need to go yet, but maybe that's something that, you know, the developer could say, okay, you know, down the road when we get the businesses, then we can kind of find where a directional sign may be.
Thinking on that. All right. Mr. Clerk, it's a roll call vote.
All right. Supervisor?
Yes.
Treasurer?
Yes.
Gary Elder? Yes. Dr. Steele?
Yes.
Katherine Henry?
I love it, but I don't think I can.
Clerk Ryan Cook is a yes.
All right, thank you. So it's passed. I appreciate your input to that, Mike, and excited to see the changes taking place out there. Item 9, public comments for action items remaining on the agenda this evening. So anyone who's here from the public, if there are items on the agenda that you wish to speak to before we do, this is your opportunity to do so. All right, and seeing none, we will close the first public comment period. There'll be another one toward the end of the meeting, and you're welcome to participate at that time. Item 10, we moved parts of, but we retained 10, Roman numeral 3. And therefore, I'm going to ask, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as reduced?
I'll make that motion.
It's been moved. Seconded, all right. Any discussion?
Just, point us out that we are spending, and I'm in favor of this, but that item is to spend essentially $13,500 for, things that are needed for the fire department. I'm sorry I didn't catch this as far as the timing, I thought I did, I must have asked for it to be in the wrong part. Item 18, we're also talking about items that are needed for the fire department, and the only reason why I bring that up is because, I noticed, in items that we're going to be talking about, since we're breaking down the approval of the bills, there's already $53,000 of, stuff just in this set of bills that's going specifically to the fire department, plus the item 18 being $42,000, and then this being $13,500. Again, something I can do about moving it now, I guess, but that was just my concern, is I was hoping to try to look at all of those pieces all together. I understand they're all different pieces of equipment, but it's $95,000 in one meeting for one department of the township, which seemed.
This one here is for the water sewer department.
What was that?
This is for the water sewer
Oh my
department.
gosh, thank want to go ahead and touch it before?
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That is passed. Item number 11, unfinished business from our previous meeting. I need a motion to remove the item from the table. It has to do with the amended Michigan mutual aid box alarm system.
I'll make a motion to remove the item from the table.
Support. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that one is back on the table. And I'll call for a motion to approve it. Then we also have the chief here tonight. He's been waiting patiently. I think probably would like to provide some input on that. We would appreciate it much. But we'll place that on the table and then ask him to come and address the board.
I'll make the motion to approve the agreement.
Support. Support, all right. Amy, would you be willing to step to the mic there? And again, if you have questions, you could give us a brief overview. And we did touch on it last meeting ever so briefly. But
First off, for those who do not know who I am, this is here for second or third meeting. My name is Dan Hammy. I've been a lifelong resident of Georgetown Township. I've been fire chief for 15 years now. Been doing Georgetown Fire a lot longer than that, but the fire chief for 15. My office is here within the township office. If you ever have any questions or need any information, here's where you can find me during the day. So, in reference to the mutual aid box alarm system or MABUS agreement, this has been implemented probably 20, 25 years ago. Originated in Illinois, and basically spiderwebbed from there, I guess the best way to put it. In starting this in Illinois, it's a totally different structure than what you see in Michigan. In that, most of the departments here in Michigan are on a paid-on-call basis, as we are. You have got, as an example, Grand Rapids is full-time or career. Several other ones around East Grand Rapids is more of a public safety. But the majority in West Michigan, Ottawa County are paid on call. This originated in Ottawa County to try to update our mutual aid agreement. Now, do we need a mutual aid agreement of some sort? Absolutely. The reason being is the liability this puts Georgetown Township under or another municipality under if they do not have a signed agreement. And I'll give you an example here. 5-10 years ago, we had a structure fire in the middle of the winter, and one of the neighboring departments came in to assist us because we had a previous structure fire going elsewhere in the township. And when they arrived on scene, it was winter time, and their personnel stepped off the apparatus, walked up the parking lot, and slipped and fell and broke his leg. Now, seeing we had this agreement, they could not come back at Georgetown Township. Everything was covered, medical-wise, workman's comp was all covered by his department. So that, if anything, is the main reason why we should have a mutual aid agreement. We've had them for, and I've seen them in 1991, maybe there's some before that, but the goal right now is to get all 21 fire departments in Ottawa County signed onto this agreement. Now, this agreement, as you read it, allows for responses out of Ottawa County, in Michigan, and also if you get requested by another state. My thoughts on this, signing this agreement, I am not interested in sending our apparatus or our personnel to Illinois or Detroit or another venue away from Ottawa County. Now, that doesn't include, we couldn't go to Kent County or Allegan. Muskegon County is kind of far north, where the northern Ottawa County fire departments would basically absorb that. But so that is my stance on this agreement.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for the Chief before
guy in here, and he's like, well, I have no problem going to Detroit or Lansing, does this agreement help us out with that, that doesn't happen?
Say that again?
Does this agreement make it so that we get another fire chief that we would only stay in Ottawa County? Or just,
The superintendent can take care of that for you.
okay, I'm just asking a question, just because somebody new comes in, like, yeah, I have no problem sending guys to Lansing or wherever, I'm like, you know, who makes that decision? Is that decided by you specifically, or?
Well, basically, it would be my signature or Dan's signature or
Okay.
both. But, if another fire chief would be hired,
Right.
that's totally his call. If he may have an interest in doing it, but I always run that type of information by the manager.
And I like the 30-day out provision in the jar.
And we have, when it was here, probably 5-10 years ago, we were a part of it. And, one of the departments that signed on, once we got into it, they tried changing this, changing that, making it more, mandatory that you had to run into, a neighboring county. And, at that point, I decided it was not in the best interest for Georgetown Township that we opted out. We gave them a 30-day notice, and this was, Ottawa County's division. We have executive board members that serve Ottawa County. I sent a letter to them and also to Mavis requesting our removal from the division.
I have a couple questions. I'm not sure if you're the one to answer them or not, so it's totally okay if you're not the right guy to answer these. And it, because maybe they're more industry based. So on this proposed agreement, section K, it's talking about, that each party is responsible for obtaining, licenses, permits, certificates, government authorizations for its employees, to have to perform to enable them to perform the obligations under the agreement. Upon request, a party shall furnish copies of all these documents to the requesting party. I'm just wondering if that's meant to be open to the public, or if that's just enabling you guys to request from each other proof that you guys are all covered?
Yeah, it's basically they supply me with a copy as we supply them with a copy. And this is another fire department.
Right, okay. And then I think my only other question for you, section 10 talks about liability, and it talks about, actually has a little bit of confusing language there in the middle sentence, but then it says that it is also agreed that none of the parties shall be liable for the failure to respond to for any reason to any request for fire services, which I get. I mean, if you guys can't respond, for example, or somebody else can't respond and you sent out a call for additional help from a different department. But then it says, or for leaving the scene of an incident with proper notice after responding to a request for service. So, and maybe I just read the wording of that wrong, but if another, I guess the flip side, let's say you were asking another department for help, because we had, a whole neighborhood that had an issue or something. And another fire department said, hey, we respond, we're gonna come out, we're gonna help. And so I'm, in theory, I'm assuming that means other, departments yet would then not respond if they think it's covered. If that,
And I'll take you back to a department in Ottawa County here a month ago. They were requested in Allegan County to assist them on a structure fire. And that department in Ottawa County basically let them know they could not respond. They did not have the staffing on that day, so they declined the offer to provide fire protection.
I guess my question for you is that's the first half where they're saying like, we just can't respond. But if they've already signed on and said, yep, we're coming and we're there, and they're already out there, is there, I guess what would be called like an industry standard for whatever proper notice would look like after they said they're going to be there, they show up and all of a sudden they're like, yeah, we're gonna leave. Is there some standard what is proper notice, or is that just a legal term that the attorneys came up with?
Well, the way that the Mavis responding to an incident outside of the state of Michigan or even in Detroit area or very quite distance from here, you are committed to being at that incident until you are released from the MABUS directors, I guess is the best way to put it, or the department that's in charge of the incident. You don't just run out there, help them out for 4 to 8 hours and then say, well, we're going home, we're done. You do not leave until they release you. And that's one of the negative side of it that I don't want to run to Detroit or anywhere else. I look at, again, Allegan County, Kent County, Muskegon County, like I said, the northern departments would scarf that up, so it'd be pretty much Kent County and Allegan County, and everyone within Ottawa County.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. Any more comments on the board? All right, hearing none, motions before you, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And that motion is carried. Thank you. Item 12, again, some unfinished business from our previous meeting, having to do with road resurfacing for 2021. Is there a motion to remove this item from the table?
Support.
All right, moved and supported. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, that item is on the table before you and is available for a new motion, whichever direction this board should choose to take. And now I can move to approve what was proposed by township staff. Oh, I know this. All right, move to support. I know that it's also come through committee, and so I was expecting that someone would move differently. But this is
I
not.
just needed a minute, because you kind of rushed through that last item, so I was just making a note, as well. If you were expecting me to make a motion, I certainly could, but I needed to make a note about that.
It's been moved and supported for the township staff proposal that has been presented to you in PDF form, and we have several other possible proposals that have been submitted for consideration, one of which was considered at the utilities subcommittee meeting. And, so the matter is before the board for discussion. Someone wish to address this?
I guess I'll start. This was an interesting one, and I've been kind of dealing with this for the past 5 years as far as what is the procedure, how do we go about, what's a policy, what's the most common sense way to handle these, just because it's a difficult list to put together. And that's why I brought up goal setting, because I think this is something that needs a strategy, because if you look at it, say, well, we can do it just based on the year it was put in, that's good, it's a great, probably one of the best ways, but some roads just don't have a lot of traffic, so it's gonna last longer. And then, you could look at it, say, we'll pick key feeder roads where you know, say like, Cedar Lake is a big road, we're like, we put through. What's it called, Hager, over by my neighborhood, that's a big feeder road. And then you get smaller sub-roads that just don't see a lot of traffic. So it's, you almost kind of have to have a strategy of what is the goal, what do you establish some sort of policy to kind of go, to get behind. The other confusing part is, so we got one rating from the road commission, and we have another rating from the township, a different scale. So which one you go by, they don't always agree. There's no easy way to put together a list. But driving this, I just kind of went down some of them that are on the staff list, they're really not that bad. And then some of these that weren't, like, let's see, double check, make sure before I say Kevin Court wasn't on there. Kevin Court, which is actually a road, they would call a long cul-de-sac, it's just terrible condition. It didn't make the list, so I don't know how you go about establishing this. Maybe we have a nomination system where I've got the worst road in least get a heads up, or maybe it's our DPW department as they're driving to service a fire hydrant or a pump station or whatever, they're noticing, you see lots of potholes, and they can know. I'm not sure what that system is. But I think there needs to be a way to kind of make sure we're spending the money addressing the roads that are in worse condition, that need it the most first. But I did notice what I pushed for you 5 years was if we're doing a road, like Stonehenge. We're hitting cul-de-sacs. That's what we said is if we're going down the road, I guarantee it's cheaper when they're pulling it up and reusing it. It's cheaper to just hit that 300, 500 foot cul-de-sac rather than, we'll hit that in a year or two. And then we come back, and that's what we have today is Gulfside Court and Fairwood Court. Two short little cul-de-sacs that we did Gulfside, I want to say 2 years ago, 3 years ago. We did Fairwood last year, Wallen 1 year, and then Gulfside, and then Fairwood 3 years. And we could get those in one shot. So it's one of those, you got some flexibility, not just terrible road condition, but if one's bad, and the cul-de-sacs, it's not that bad, we probably get 5 more years to be done with it, and you got consistency. And then you don't have those cold laps too. Well, that's an issue you see a lot where you've got older asphalt, newer asphalt, it's just not good on. You're gonna have issues. It's gonna happen quicker. Part of it too, I think we need maintenance, and address that goal setting is, we have a parks department. You see main cracks in roads, those should be filled with a sealer. The sooner you do that, the better. If you let it go, and Gary would probably know more than me, but once that rainwater starts going down the street, now you're affecting the base of that street. Now you're talking, instead of resurfacing, replacement. It's one of those address little problems before they become big problems. So that's why I'm pushing for the goal setting is, we as a board can say, what are the directions we go on a number of these agenda items, we'll have more coming up later, but just kind of figure out a strategy rather than.
If I may, there has been, just for a little bit of context for history, there's been some strategy, albeit maybe not perfectly followed. That is, there were some years back when the consensus of the board was to direct the township, in this case, Trustee, but before the Dan or someone, to investigate and specifically go out and look at an additional investigation. The board had come to us with recommendations, and that they felt like previous to that, that just judging by the year and date, like you say, was not always, in line with what really needed it versus what didn't. And so we went to a more intensive review, and part of the idea behind it was, and you pointed out, Michael, maybe it was intended perfectly, but it has largely been to try to cover areas and to have a cycle, about 15-year cycle, 15, maybe we stretch a little bit to 20 with some of the expenditures in recent years. But I always understood that the objective was, because we could save for a linear foot, and I know Gary Belden, but I think, it's less costly, as you say, to do areas, okay? And so areas doesn't always match up with age. Well, if you're consistent in your practices over 15, 20 years, but so I don't think it was hodgepodge, but I think it was cost savings, and I like to say cost, and that is part of the method we've currently been using, and truly trying to hit areas, albeit as you said, imperfectly, because you were pointing out a couple of examples where we didn't know how to skip and come back.
It's not an easy task.
Yeah.
Put together a comprehensive list that covers that aspect, just because each list has great, like, yeah, that street should be on the list, or it's not on one list, but it's on another. But I guess my question would be too, and this might be more good, when Ottawa County Road Commission uses the PACER system, are they coming out and, is it digital cameras that are assessing the road, the laptops feeding back? I'm not real familiar.
They do the pager ratings, they have a truck, but I don't think they're doing the pager ratings every year, if that's what you're asking.
And that's what I wonder too, is that how often do they break it up in sections, or?
Yeah, so it's not done every year, so that's why you're seeing some of the distinctness, because the pager rating may be old. We'd have to check with them on the age of each pager rating, but the Metro Council has a truck that can review them, and they do that. They don't do residential streets. I don't know what the timetable is, but it's not every year.
Oh.
I think it's quite spread out, actually. They do the primaries more frequently than not residential.
I like your idea though, I guess the thought, and it was actually something that came up in the committee meeting, to talk about, excuse me, to talk about the the neighborhoods. When you come in and you do a neighborhood, I think it was, John that asked, Rob that question in our committee about, if there is a worthwhile savings, if you go in and you're gonna do, for example, one street within a defined neighborhood, does it then save money to go ahead and do the other streets or, cul-de-sacs that branch off of the street and that kind of thing. And so, the interesting thing is that, I could say that this year, one that comes to mind is, Rolling Hills Court was done, but, and it is literally dead center in the middle of the neighborhood. Rolling Hills Drive was not done, Rolling Hills, Wood, I can't think of all of the other connecting lanes. What was that?
Iron is one of those.
Okay, I'm sorry, yeah, I'm gonna just agree with you, I didn't hear which one you said, I read those most of the time, so sorry about that. Kevin Court and Michael Drive and Michael Court, all the same defined neighborhood, all very crappy roads. There's not a spot on there where I guess let me put it this way. The reason why I had a concern is when I saw on this list that if you want to look at it this way, that what we were given is essentially like maybe the top, top 100 roads or whatever your original list was, but you only had the green ones that were going to be the ones that you're recommending. I just, looked through to see which ones were on there, and, there are chunks of neighborhoods on there, and so in the original list, the biggest chunk really centered around the Stonehenge neighborhood that you mentioned earlier, Mike. And if you go through there, there's basically two main roads that go through the neighborhood, and then you have a bunch of, I believe they're all cul-de-sacs. I don't think they have really meet that ground or anything. I could be wrong about that, but at any rate, there's definitely two main roads that go through. And if you travel on those two main roads, and it's a lengthy neighborhood, the whole neighborhood is very new, and the roads are certainly new. You can see on here it says, like basically 2007. And there are only about 5 notable areas where the road has been patched. There were no visible areas where those roads had any holes that were not patched. The patching seems to be in good, I'd say working order, but it doesn't need, sometimes the patching needs patching. That's certainly the case in many areas in Kevin Court and, Michael Court, Michael Drive, well, and I do believe Kevin Court, a lot of the whole neighborhood there. So if you look at, doing a community, I appreciate the fact that a lot of the streets on the original staff recommendation do seem to be, in that area. And then the other one that stuck out to me was, for example, the Chevy neighborhood, Corvette and Lumina, and I think there might have been a couple that are close to there. So I did appreciate having those be together to, in theory, save the costs. When you look at the list that not only I proposed, but the one that ended up being recommended by the committee, there are definite areas where there's a neighborhood, or it's maybe not necessarily a defined neighborhood per se, because a lot of the ones like say in between Minor and 28th Street aren't necessarily a defined neighborhood, but they're close in vicinity and that kind of thing. If they made it on the list, a lot of those ended up being on there. But if you look at it, if we're talking about the point being made just a minute ago by Jim that, trying to really get with that 15-year cycle and maybe stretching it up to 20, if we don't go with the ones that are on this age list, we're not 20 years. We're definitely not 15. We're not 20. We're 23 years before these would get resurfaced. And it's not that they're in good shape because they're just not traveled upon. A lot of these roads are in very poor condition. And then a lot of, especially if you compare them to the ones that were on the original staff recommendation list, the ones that are, from 2007, 2006, 2000, I think there were only 2 that were from the 1990s. The condition of those roads is just not overall as poor as the ones that end up being put on here when you go by the age list. But I guess for me, I'm not quite sure, you know, it was mentioned when the vote happened to put me on that particular committee. It was mentioned that, you know, essentially the hard work or, you know, the roll your sleeves up kind of work gets done in those committees and hashing out all these details. I'm not sure the point of having us go and do that and hash out all of these details and, you know, everything that you guys have brought up so far is something that's been brought up that was brought up in the committee. We went through even more details, and then we ended up having a motion and we voted on it. And so, I'm not sure what the point of it would be to have a committee go through that task if that's just gonna be ignored in the committee as a whole.
Okay, so if I hear you clearly, I call for a motion, no one said anything, I placed the motion on the floor. We certainly, I don't think it'll be efficient or good use of our time in a meeting here to go street by street. So we've got lumped proposals, various ones that have been provided to each of us. If the consensus of the board is to choose a different proposal than the one that the staff proposed and that's before you now, then I would say let's move toward some sort of discussion and motion, and no one's intending to ignore anyone's input in that respect. So, is there back to silence?
I'm trying to think of the wording. You tend to do things very quickly. So, if we don't care how it's worded, then I guess I would motion to table your prior motion and replace it with a motion to approve the, I guess what's called as it's in the agenda, approve the Katherine Henry proposed by age 1 option as recommended by the Utilities Committee. Again, I'm not sure if that's the appropriate wording, because I was trying to figure out if that's.
Okay. Second. Moved and supported, okay. Discussion on the motion to withdraw or table, if you will, or the motion that's before you to table it and otherwise move to a new motion proposing the Katherine Henry proposed by age 1 PF. Discussion about that, and Gary, if you think procedurally, you know, there's some other way to phrase it. I know it's kind of.
My brain's turning like
Yeah, I know, I
60
can see
miles
it.
an hour,
I
but
can see it in your eyes.
I think you're fine. I think you're fine.
Okay.
I think you're fine.
Excuse me?
For a substitute motion.
Substitute motion, okay.
Yeah.
Whoever supported your motion, you could withdraw your support. Withdraw your motion.
Okay, I don't think we'll go that route. We can go the route of the substitute, if that's, yep, it's been moved and we'll say supported then by Ryan. Any discussion about that? If none, we can vote on shifting our focus and discussion to that list instead.
I'll just make the comment on the committee brought the proposal that she's bringing right now. It's kind of a no-win situation because all these roads are poor. I mean, they all need to be fixed at some time. And, so I think that was the reason why the committee went by age, just to try to go that way and see how it goes. And I appreciate the work Rod has done on this too. It's a whole new committee. So kind of going through that, so.
Sure. All right. This time then, were you going to say something, Ryan? No, I got you. Okay. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Go for it. Sure.
Accepting Katherine.
Substitute. Substitute.
Okay. Katherine.
Yes.
Becky.
No.
Gary Miller. Yes. Yes.
No.
Ryan Kinsey, yes.
Okay. So that now, motion is before you. It's been substituted now for this particular proposal among the ones you've submitted. I know you discussed some of this at length in your utility subcommittee meeting. Those who are part of that committee. Are there any other comments the board wishes to make?
I would just say when I said goals session, it wasn't the question of working the utilities committee, but just as board as a whole for a goal, is it taking, because our list keeps growing every year, and roads aren't getting any younger.
We're adding more roads.
Would a goal of the board, I was looking for a bigger theme of, is getting on top of this resurfacing an important thing where we might want to jump, typically we spend I want to say $2 million on average. Typically, well, when money wasn't used for other things, it dropped down to $1 million less. an important goal of the board, the current board, we might want to pump it to 3 or 3.5. So that's what I mean, it's just an overall, if we got a limited amount of money to spend that resource, let's make sure we're putting it where we should be putting it, and we do that as a group, deciding what those important things are. Because one of the things that I reminded was the issue of the sidewalk on the expansion of Cottonwood. What's more important, the sidewalk, and I don't want to get off the topic, but if you got a certain amount of money, you're limited to it, we have to make sure that putting it in the right direction, everybody's on board, or at least for the most part, on board. That was kind of what I was talking about.
When in theory, we all have a goal-setting meeting and we kind of really discuss some of those things. In theory, that means that would lead to less discussion, point by point by point on different items as they come up on agendas throughout that period of time, because there's already been some discussion about, with the resources we have, what are we able to accomplish? I mean, not that everybody's going to agree from that point, but it just, so I get what you're saying.
Right, general direction, and then just working on the fine details, and then it doesn't get forward. And I hate to question committees, because I don't trust the committees, I'm gonna call out everything they said and disagree with it, but kind of gets everybody on the same path, it kind of streamlines it, kind of in the long run. Right.
Appreciate the work you're doing on that, Lisa. Thanks for taking time. Other discussion, Dean, before we call for a vote?
I agree with Gary, as far as you're in the rock and the hard place on this one. I mean, there's a lot of roads that need to be fixed. I think what the committee did is put together a list that at least brings all the roads that we see up to year 2000 and sooner. I think I really like what the utility committee did.
Okay.
And at least it's bringing it up within 20 years.
Sure.
Not to keep talking, but just one more point. I would say that this is, of all lists, the Katherine list based on date, I think is the most encompassing, the most gross issue. But this isn't, I mean, it is kind of set in stone, but it's not. So we could always add to this list, or we could switch out some roads where utilities said, you know what, we're gonna maybe switch this road out, I don't know, say Rogers on here.
The problem is we're up against the clock a little bit. We gotta get these things on the county's list too. So I mean, this, we talked about this in the utilities committee too. So we gotta make decisions because that's.
Right, we don't want to get crazy changing, but I kind of talked with Dan about it, is if we tell, hey, we're gonna do 10,000 foot road with the road commission, and,
I don't think it works
that
that
would
way.
not switch, not say throw away this list in 6 months, but if we want to add a couple, I know we've done it in the past where we've added roads to.
We've added roads because the prices came in good because we were on the early side of it. And new roads came up and we said, hey, let's increase the hit that next few roads on the list because the price was good. We've done that, got good prices, but not like drop the list or substitute it. Because they're gonna draw up plans and contractors are gonna bid based on the roads we provide.
Right.
So
That's
it's gonna be
contract,
hard.
it's a seaside conditions, it's
Yeah,
any
so-
obstacles, any issues that we know we have.
Do you get that bid then when that comes out?
The road commission does all the bidding. They have like.
They do, but then do you get that? See how much money it is? If there's, like, let's say they come in low, are you allowed to add?
Well, but the contractor's not obligated, so we can ask the contractor if they'll do more, and we can ask you if you wanna do more, it's negotiated at price, at the same prices, yes.
You can do that.
We have done that in the past, if the contractor was willing.
Okay.
If the contractor says, no, or I wanna change the price, then.
We should be able to pick up if it's below budget, because, I mean, if we're creating a number here, a street cost number, there's gotta be a number that's calculated based off weight. So a cost, what you're expecting, and if also that bid comes in significantly less, then you should be aware of it.
Yeah, they want us to do more roads, they're gonna call and say, hey, the price came in cheaper, you wanna do more, that's what it does, it happens.
Yeah. So like, let's say they do a main road, and the cost comes in, and they say, hey, you know what would you charge to do that cul-de-sac, which is 500 feet? The contractor can say, well, my equipment's there, and I gotta mill that out anyways, I can give you a better price, because I had to move it in here anyways, we'll give you a cost on that, and we can hopefully negotiate prices come in. Oil is cheap right now, so I'm hoping cars are cheap, so we'll see what happens. But
motion's been made on item 13 to approve the agreement and has been seconded. And I'm asking whether there's any board discussion about that proposed agreement.
I did have some items I just wanted to bring to the attention here. I preferred to iron out all the details in discussion at the committee, but that did not, wasn't allowed to do that. So, sorry, I'm just trying to find my notes specifically on that. A few of the things I will say that, there are just some word choices, I guess, not necessarily word choices. Like words are missing or there's an incorrect word, which might seem like it's no big deal, but in the land of the fact of paying attorneys to draft this stuff, they should have done it the right way. So I would be concerned that it would lead to confusion later on. There's also, I guess, some more specific concerns, such as in section 5. The language is vague. In my opinion, it's not in the interest of our residents. The issue that I was raising at the committee was, in the end, it ends up being like a taxation without representation issue, and there might be some ways around that. But the discussion was essentially cut short on how to try to remedy that situation. So if you are, billed by, it goes by water. So let's say I live in Georgetown Township and I'm close, I forget what some of the streets I use in my example, but anyway, a street that's over close to the city of Pleasantville. If it makes more sense for them to do my sewer, then, and I hook up to them, the bill will actually still come from Georgetown Township, but vice versa, unless I said that backwards. It goes by water, right? Okay. So if I'm close enough to the water hookup for the city of Pleasantville, even though I might have my sewer here in Georgetown Township, my billing is actually done, I'm receiving bill from the city of Pleasantville. And the problem I guess I have with that is that's not, although even, I think it might have been Dan made the point that, initially when you hook up, there are, and he might have even brought up examples, I can't remember right now, but initially when you hook up, that property owner might be, electing to acknowledge, hey, I understand that's not my municipality, but I'm okay with that, and I want to go ahead and hook up to, instead of well, I want to hook up to water over there, or instead of septic, I want another sewer. I get that, but then it's binding to all future property owners where that's not, as far as I'm aware, there's nothing recorded with the deed anywhere that indicates that. So there's no actual, there's no recorded notice. In most instances, there's not going to be any actual notice. It's not something that people typically think to ask, like, hey, you're in the township, but are both water and sewer actually billed by the township? And so you have an issue, so say for example, my water is hooked up to Hudsonville, and I had a dispute with them about my bill. I'm not represented there. I don't know, who the appropriate people are. I don't have relationships there, that kind of thing. So there's that issue. But then if they just ignore me and they don't want to resolve the dispute, and they say, no, you just owe it, now we're going to add on some other fees or whatever, then they can, I don't know when it happens, if it's just right before tax time, but at some point anyway, if they say to, again, I don't know who it would be, if it be to Dan or whatever, but Dan, Katherine owes, whatever, $200 on her water bill over here, even though I might not have really had the opportunity to just go there, they, according to this agreement, would have no choice but to add it to my property taxes. So then I'm being essentially literally taxed for something that I didn't have the opportunity appropriately to address. So there's just some issues like that where I feel like the discussion as it was started, that perhaps there was a way to get around that and to resolve it in a way that makes sense and still go through with an agreement and consolidate, because in general, combine into one?
I think if you wanted to make a change like that, we would just end up staying with the current 3 agreements, which all have those stipulations in them. So I don't think that change would be acceptable. So I don't think there's any point discussing it, just go down the agreement, we'll just stay with the old agreements, if that's the direction you want to go.
And in that case, I guess I just voiced a concern that we're not putting the residents of our community at the forefront of our decision making, because we should always be making sure we're doing something in their interest, especially if we're gonna lead into a situation where they're gonna be literally taxed without having appropriate representation, so.
I could also say, what you're doing here today is allowing our residents to connect to their utilities, and which otherwise they would not be able to do. So to me, the whole purpose of this is to allow our residents to have access to a service that we can't provide them. And so it's not to force them to a service, it's to allow them to have a service. And yes, that comes with paying your bill, and the same stipulations that you have, our own residents are treated that way for our own selves, and, they're treating their residents the same way. So you're giving them a service, access to a service they would otherwise not be able to use. That's the alternative.
Well, except for it's replacing agreements that are already there, is what you're saying, so that's not really a fair way to look at it, because we're not creating a new agreement where one doesn't exist. We're consolidating 3 different agreements that have differing language and putting it into one, which I'm all for that. So for what it's worth, again, this is one of those things that I think the whole reason why we have committees is, to be able to roll up your sleeves and do the dirty work, so to speak, and get those details sorted out. And it's not for my lack of trying that we didn't do that in the committee. But there are those, substantive concerns, and then however you want to call it, but there's other concerns where it's, some word usage, the fact that we're referring to the city of Granville in here, I'm not sure why, because it's a contract that would be between the city of Hudsonville and Georgetown Township. So I don't know if I missed something in committee that, I know you referenced them, I thought it was just as an example.
I'd have to look at the part with Granville. Granville, there's certain rules that all of us as collective systems have to follow that go to the Granville plan, so I'd have to really reference that. Obviously, Hudsonville's attorney prepared the agreement, we've had one that reviewed it for basic concerns in the language, but I'd have to study exactly why that's in there. But there's certain prohibitions to being discharged to Granville, and then we passed out those prohibitions on to all the customers, and so they're passing on those to the customers that are connecting to their system via this agreement.
Okay.
This agreement did come out of committee, so, and I know Gary was in there as well. Do you mind giving a little feedback? Why? Because it came 2 to 1. So I was just kind of curious, like, what your feedback was. Because every township that butts against each other is going to have this situation. So if we run water and sewer down 48th Avenue, and London Township is to the west, we're to the east, and we own the water and sewer in 48th Avenue, then the London Township people are going to have to hook up to a water and sewer system that we put together, and they're going to have to pay for it. London Township's, Jamestown has already got us, agreement with us to run sewer.
We have one with London, Granville.
Yeah, so, it is the nature of the beast. Generally, that's what you run into when you have lot lines, and you have to just kind of get along with each other and make it happen. So, I understand the taxation part, and not having a representation, you might say, but on the other hand, it's just a utility. It's not a, I don't look at it as a tax. I look at it as a utility. It's not any different than liquor or telephone or gas.
By this, they have to put it on your property taxes if you don't, if the other municipality says, hey, they owe this.
But they also can shut it off too. So if you don't pay your water bill, you just shut that valve off on the front yard and you just don't get any more water. So.
Can I ask you a question? Because you said something just now that I didn't catch, maybe per se at the committee meeting. When you answered Ryan's question just now, it seemed to me like you were thinking that in general, like the idea of this contract is a good thing, and the purpose for having a contract that allows the cooperation of the water resources and sewer resources is a good thing, which I agree with. Am I correct in hearing you say that that's the source of the smoke, not necessarily how this particular draft is worded? Like, are you okay, what Dan was just saying is that if we wanted to make any, you know, these improvements or changes to this draft, then we would just be, you know, stuck with just going with three that are already in place. So there's already contracts that do the bigger picture of what you're talking about.
We already have contracts with London and Jamestown and City of Hudsonville.
I mean, have the Granville and Allendale.
And Granville, I mean, we're all connected. Everything runs through Georgetown, then Granville through Shrimp Plant. So Jamestown, London,
But this isn't, and maybe I'm missing, Dan, this contract isn't doing anything new in the sense that any relationships, like between us and the city of Hudsonville, there's already a contract.
Correct.
It's just that it's blending contracts that already exist.
I guess it could potentially do, the other ones are very specific to their areas. This could include other areas or allow those areas to grow without another contract being adopted. And it kind of started because we had a fifth house on Berry Street, a Georgetown resident who wanted to connect to Hudsonville Utilities. But the agreement really addresses these houses on Berry, so that's kind of how it started. So it's a little bit unclear whether we could add that other house, because it kind of says these houses on Berry. We interpreted that it did and allowed it to do it, but this agreement kind of would cover all the streets, and if there was one yet to be determined street, it would cover that as well.
You just cast a slightly wider net than what we already have.
Right, instead of having to change the agreement like we did 3 times already, 3 different agreements, it would be one agreement, and as long as the municipalities both agree, we could allow additional homes to participate.
I guess my concern or my question, my plea is that I think we could probably, I didn't hear any words to the contrary, but we probably all agree that in general, that's gonna be a great thing. I don't think there's any dispute that having a contract that replaces 3 other contracts that have a little bit contradictory things, or, you know, that, you know, by expanding, I think I just said that they're, talking about just casting a little bit wider net. I don't think anybody's gonna say that's a bad thing. My only concern is about the particular wording of this one that isn't necessary to get the job done. But if, it sounds like just the fact of trying to put in the work to have wording that is going to serve our residents better, but still does the same overall task, that means it's not really worth the effort, and we're just gonna, you know, table the whole thing. My concern is, if it's worth doing it all, it's worth doing it the right way. So, for whatever that's worth, if I'm just gonna always be a lone vote, but I would
I
rather.
think it'll always be the lone vote, and I think there was a majority that came out of committee that felt like it is worded the right way. Is the board ready to vote on?
Actually, that's actually not what he said, so that's why I just asked
It was 2
him.
to 1, right?
But I just asked him for clarification on that, so.
Sure.
He said it wasn't about the specific wording, it was about the overall idea of having that, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't see a problem with it because you're gonna have a draft. You're always gonna have a problem when you have 2 townships trying to share a line.
But this isn't, they're not gonna do anything more, our opportunity to make any corrections is now, that's what I'm saying. So any of the issues that are in it, this is our opportunity to correct it. I'm not saying we should just throw it by the wayside. I'm saying it's, you know, good opportunity, but by us approving it, we're approving it word for word the way that it is now.
And those are our, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but our options right now are to accept this or put it by the wayside. That's the motion.
I don't think it should be. No,
Or to amend, and we've not had a motion made to that effect.
well, I guess my point is I did make that motion in the committee and I was shut down for making that, so there was no vote on that at all. So if it's pointless, it's pointless. If you guys all just want to accept it the way it is, but I would prefer to have a motion on the table to amend it so we get it done the right way and we move forward with it. It's a great idea to consolidate. I just don't want to do something that's like, well, it's not worth the time to do it the right way, let's just rush it through. I also don't want to necessarily just throw away, but.
Mr. Supervisor, I think we need to vote on this one. Keep it going.
What's the way, what's the rough cost to make revisions? $1,000 a term?
Well, you're not even proposed language yet.
There's been no motion, there's been no specific revision suggested.
Who drafted this? Us or Hudson?
It mirrors the agreement they have with Jamestown.
What's that?
It mirrors their agreement with Jamestown.
Do we have
learning of the business.
Yes.
Correct.
They made a few changes. They didn't look at grammar as, we didn't need that review, but they made a couple of changes to things they thought could be eliminated, and those were eliminated.
So, in the absence of a motion, we do have a motion before you. Everyone ready to vote? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Okay, I think I heard 4-2. Michael and Catherine, is that right? All right, this passed. You know what? I want to make a launch. We've not done this in the past. It's 9:30 now. I know there are a couple of you who expressed that physically you're unable to sit for extended periods of time. I'm someone, I can forget to eat, I can go proper. So I don't want to be insensitive. Does anyone feel the need to stretch or just to continue and plow through and get it done?
I can use a stretch.
Okay,
I-
all right. Let's take 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's not open. Oh, now it is.
Wait, I don't know if I want to share.
You don't. You might bring the beer.
If you share with him, then nobody else knows. We're not in here, right? Nobody else is in here, so.
Batteries running. Oh, yeah.
I already ran out once. Last week I ran out.
This may never make it.
I had to do that, I had to watch it. I walked right up there, I walked right up there and fixed it, right back down. You know what it is.